The spec that has fallen from grace throughout Shadowlands, and when it was a king in BFA, and now it's what? It's coming back in Dragonflight, and it's looking to be one of the coolest healers in the game. And yes, I am talking about Discipline Priest with the probably, hopefully, maybe final changes to the talents and how it's looking. Discipline Priest could be in its best shape ever, and I'm actually very happy for Discipline, and this is what we are going to be talking about today in today's video about beta Dragonflight concerning Discipline Priest. And if you like the type of content that we do and you want to see more, the cringe, the jokes, the funs, the chats, check our Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Marcelian&Online, where we do stream 4 to 5 days a week. We play keys and do raids with you guys, and we talk about WoW, talk about buffs, nerfs, tier set, raids, dungeons, everything in the world and more, while I am salty and afraid of Vulperos at this point because I don't know what's going on. And you can check that out, leave a follow if you like, and maybe even stay in and chat and have some good fun. Thank you, and let's actually take a look at Discipline Priest, which we have covered Priest in the last couple of days, and I think there's no real point in talking about the general talent tree. We know that Shadowman is gone, and now that Atonement is applied with Renew, it's still, if you haven't watched any of our Discipline Priest coverages before, I mean, it's a new world, it's a new playstyle. You want essentially stuff like Words of the Pious for the damage and healing that it will help you on your ramps, and the ramps will be more powerful. Binding heals were just changed today, and when you heal a target and you are healed by binding, you will get Atonement as well, which is a new thing, which is kind of cool. As more Atonement sources, better, more interesting gameplay. You cannot really take Power Word life with Angelic Bulwark and Mind Games at the same time with its all upgrades. You can only go for the normal version, no upgrades to it, if you do want to get as many of the capstones as you possibly can. There's quite a decent amount of flexibility in the talent tree, with the exception of Power Infusion, because that's never gonna go away. You may also want to do change that you don't like to the tree if you want to get stuff like Shadow Word Death and its upgrade Death and Madness for the Mindbender build, if you do decide to go that route. So there are options and playstyles that you can opt for, which I guess it's cool. It makes the spec fresh and interesting, and this is kind of at the very most what a general class talent tree should do. It has maybe 1 or 2 many throughput nodes, but it's not as egregious, definitely not as it was initially, where you just had like a gazillion throughput nodes that you had to take. So it just feels like you can kind of tap a little bit into the shadow or into the holy side of the specs as a Discipline Priest, which is what you should be doing thematically anyway. Now in the spec talent tree, there are a few changes that you might want to know. First of all, Spirit Shell has been removed, and Rupture is now a standalone talent, no longer at a choice node. Now it synergizes with Protector of the Frail to get pain suppression faster, and it reduces its cooldown. Since Protector of the Frail, the choice node just above, makes Power Word Shield reduce the cooldown of pain suppression by 3 seconds, and of course during Rapture you're just going to spam those shields so you can get some faster pain suppressions, which is kind of cool. And under Rupture you have a choice node now that contains Exaltation, which was here before, but it was alone and not in a choice node, and further empowers the Protector of the Frail playstyle, because Exaltation makes the duration of Rapture increase by 3 seconds, meaning you can probably realistically get 2 more shields in if you just spam them each global. And Exaltation as a choice node is with Indemnity. Atonement granted by Power Word Shield lasts an additional 3 seconds. This is probably something that maybe you want for a raid scenario, since you will be spreading more shields on more people and not spamming shields on the same people, more often than not. And while looking at the left-hand side, you have Train of Thought, now a standalone talent and no longer a choice node. So we've had quite a few of these being moved and dicked around. Make Amends was moved down as a choice node with Ages of Wrath, which was buffed by 20%, and makes a little bit more sense to have them this way, because, you know, you kind of have to. And as capstones, what Ages of Wrath does is Power Word Shield absorbs 50% additional damage, but the absorb amount decays by 3% every 1 second. We talked about this, I think, last time, where it's probably good in situations where your target is going to take a massive hit in a couple of seconds. That's predictable, and you just use those Power Word Shields to use the most amount of the increased absorb as it would decay if the absorb is not consumed. Make amends is when your penance deals damage, the duration of atonement on yourself is increased by 1 second. And when your penance heals, the duration of atonement on your target is increased by 1 second, which is an interesting playstyle. Its penance has kind of mostly been used to deal DPS, ideally in an effective healing throughput manner, but now you have options, which I guess is kind of cool because you can alter the atonement in 2 different ways. Under Sins of the Many, a 2-point talent that increases your damage by 6 and 12% for each ally affected by your atonement, you now have Wheel and Woe moved here, which makes your Penance Bolt increase the damage of your next Smite by 8% or the absorb of your next Power Word Shield by 3%, and it stacks up to 7 times, effectively taking Smite all the way up to like, what, 56% more damage, and the shield having 21% more absorb. And you can kind of stack these up and have some, you know, fat shields, which is an interesting style of the playstyle where you don't have to rely on most of your mechanics to happen during cooldowns, but you can have it, you know, some of these build-ups of stacks and rotational changes during your playstyle as well, which I am a heavy supporter of, since this is just really cool. Light's Wrath was a little nerfed, What it does right now, it's a 1.5 minute cooldown, 2.5 cast time. Invoke the Light's Wrath, dealing okay damage, radiant damage to the target, increased by 10% per ally affected by your atonement. Last time we tested this was in a dungeon, so its DPS wasn't particularly impressive, but probably after the raid test this has been changed, since you might end up doing quite a bit of damage. But then again, it's a 1.5 minute cooldown. Do we really care that much? But hey, we might care if we go down to its upgrades, which we talked about it last time. I'm not going to go into them again, but yeah, it's something that you can get back from Legion as the artifact ability from Legion. The former choice no capstones of Lenience and Evangelism are now moved right after castigation, so you can benefit from them earlier, which is kind of cool. Evangelism is probably my favorite Discipline Priest ability. And I always had to choose between it and Lenience. Was a little bit boring because Lenience is boring, but it was always mathematically better. And the capstone now is Twilight Equilibrium, which is a new ability. What this does is makes your damaging shadow spells increase the damage of your next holy spell cast within 6 seconds by 15%. Your damaging holy spells increase the damage of your next shadow spell cast within 6 seconds by 15%. So you'd probably weave in Holy and Shadow, Holy and Shadow, and Holy and Shadow, which is not necessarily a new concept. In WoW, we've had other specs do this either through healing mechanics, through tanking mechanics, through DPS mechanics. But it's cool if you want to have like a more interesting playstyle, and you can do more damage if damage is your thing. Not to mention that damage is transformed into healing through atonement. And Power of the Dark Side is like all the way up, which also influences your Shadow playstyle. Now, on the Shadow side, speaking of so much Shadow stuff, not much has changed, really. Fiending Dark was a talent that was changed to Void Summoner in terms of the name, and moved a little bit to the right. Nothing else changed for it. Expiation is now on the old spot of Fiending Dark and no longer has a connection to Inescapable Torment, the old Shadow Flame Prism legendary. What Expiation does is increase the damage of Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death by 10%. Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death consume 3 seconds of Shadow Word Pain and Purge the Wicked, depending on which one you have talented, and dealing that damage, which, I mean, it definitely works with the Inescapable Torment. Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death cause your Mind Bender to teleport behind the target, slashing up to 5 enemies. Basically, the Shadow Flame Prism mechanic. It definitely impacts it directly because the same spells deal more damage, but now you cannot go from one or the other and essentially maybe skip something like Void Summoner, which your Smite, Mind Blast, and Penance cast reduce the cooldown of Shadow Fiend by 3 seconds. Meaning that if you do want to get the Shadow Flame Prism mechanic, Blizzard definitely wants you to be able to reduce the cooldown of Mind Bender and have it more up. And which is, I guess it's a cool mechanic. Shadow Flame Prism is always a contentious thing. It kind of felt worse on Shadow than on any other spec. So, and plus it was just a Shadow legendary. So we'll see how this turns out. It's cool that you can opt into it. So, and it sounds like you might be able to do quite a bit of damage if that is your jam, if you want to like tap into the shadowy bits. Now, as far as the tier set is concerned, the 2-piece makes Power Word Shield increase the effectiveness of your next direct damage or healing spell by 10%. It'll work very nice with a 4 set, which makes Penance increase the strength of your next Power Word Shield by 100% of its damage or 30% of its healing, allowing you to easier save an ally. That did a fuck up mechanic. So they can kind of function and buff each other, which is kind of cool because some of the tier sets are slightly flat, boring, just damage increase or crit chance increase. or some of them have a little bit more intricate playstyles, which is something that they said that they don't want to do, and they kind of doubled down on a couple of tier sets that way. This is kind of in between, which is cool. It doesn't really make you pick any particular talents. You probably would pick the same talents that you would pick for this even if you didn't have this tier set, although it might put more focus onto penance and power or shield, which I guess they're the crux of Discipline Priest, which is not too bad. All in all, Discipline is looking pretty good and pretty interesting. There are a lot of concepts here that sound really cool, but make me feel like, man, I really want to play and see how this actually works. And seeing all the fun, all the different themes of super heavy shadow stuff on the right-hand side and super heavy kind of holy healing stuff on the left-hand side is really interesting. And I'm actually happy for Discipline Priest for getting one of the coolest healer talent trees that I have seen to this day. So what do you guys think? Is Discipline going to be the next bee's knees, the big kahuna, the cool hero to play? Because obviously numbers are, you know, whatever at this point. But let us know in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.